Good morning, everyone. My name is Sheila Peiffer, as you've heard, and I have been asked to speak about a subject that's already come up several times during this festival and is integral to Drawdown, which is the importance of talking about climate change and its solutions. Despite having to be virtual, we are going to attempt some involvement of you, the participants, so it would be good to have a paper and a pencil at hand for an exercise a little later. At this point in our festival, whether this is your first session or your 10th, I have some good news. There is something that you can easily do about climate change without spending a penny or doing anything drastic. Because the fact is that the most important thing that we can do about climate change is talk about it. Paul Hawkins says in his latest book, Regeneration, quote, "While vociferous climate deniers have had no problem grabbing the nearest megaphone, the overwhelming majority of people, the 90% who understand that humans are creating a warmer planet, have remained largely silent. We want to change that." Additionally, social scientists have demonstrated that change can happen in society with only a relatively small percentage of people creating a tipping point. While exact numbers are not agreed upon, research supports the idea that, as Hawkins points out, quote, "The number one cause of human change is when people around us change." So, talking is crucial. We have to communicate to others what we are changing, what concerns us, what we are thinking about doing. We need to nudge the tipping point. So how can we practice the important skill of talking about climate change? We're going to listen to an expert on this talking, Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, a professor at Texas Tech University, and also the chief scientist for the global conservation organization, the Nature Conservancy. Her new book, Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World, was released last September. So, thank you, Dr. Hayhoe. I think that this talk of hers, although some of the numbers may have changed in the couple of years since that was made, the principles still remain the same. And one of her main points is that she says we should speak from the heart. We should identify why a changing climate matters to us. So I'd like us right now to take a moment to think about what motivates us personally to be concerned about climate change. Is it being a parent, love of the outdoors, concern about health, respect for science, worry about extreme weather? What perspective would you use if you were going to start a conversation from the heart? And I'd like you to jot a few thoughts down on your paper. And if you'd like to put a few words in the chat, that would be great. I'm going to actually give us a minute to do this so that we really think about it. This is great. We have some things coming up in the chat that I think probably resonate with all of us. Love of nature, the future of our children, our mental health, wanting to live in sustainable balance, worry about the future generations, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and our nephews, and wanting to promote all life, health and survival of all other humans and other species and all species on Earth. So you get the idea, and thank you very, very much. We can continue to do that. Like anything else, we want to be able to get better at talking about climate change. We want to be ready to seize those teachable moments that may come our way with friends or family. And there's no question that the kind of heart-to-heart talk along the lines described by Hayhoe is what is ideal. But sometimes another tactic can be needed. In some situations, it is useful to have a short speech prepared, something that you can use to grab someone's attention or to briefly explain something that is of concern to you. I'm sure everyone has heard the term elevator pitch or speech. It's a quick, persuasive talk of about 30 seconds, no more, on a focused topic. Although usually used in self-promotion or interviews, this kind of focused, structured, brief talk can be very useful as a way to organize your own thoughts and also as a conversation starter. As I said, it's very structured and it has 4 very distinct steps that are simple. The first one is to state the problem or the issue. Stating the issue, which we often might do with a question, because that really gets people interested. So did you know, or have you heard, or are you worried, whatever, something like that. Next, you would state the cause, then you'd have the consequence, and then lastly, the solution or a call to action. Very important. You remember that Hayhoe stressed how important it was to have solutions. Usually each step is only a sentence, or maybe it might have to be 2 sentences. So we're going to have a practice on this. I'm going to give you an example first. During the past year, while I have been working on developing a method for individuals to reduce their carbon emissions that you've been hearing about, Carbon Crew, I found myself trying to tell people what I was doing. So I wrote this pitch to help organize my thoughts and get through my initial hesitation in talking about it. Here's the pitch that I wrote. Step 1, have you been worried about climate change but not known what to do? And you notice I phrased the issue as a question, which is a very good way to get people interested and involved. Step 2, many think that solutions to global warming lie with fossil fuel companies and government regulations, not realizing that a UN study discovered that 2/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions are a result of household decisions. Step 3, the consequence, that's right. We consumers can make a difference. And then step 4, the solution. The CREW project, Carbon Reduction for Earth Wellbeing, is a simple process of using the book 2040 to create a personal climate action plan in a small group with others. After 5 meetings, we each have a plan for reducing our carbon emissions. So I am going to give us 5 minutes to actually try to do this on our own. So now that the steps are up there, I'm going to let people jot down some ideas here. I realize it's hard to do this in this kind of a setting, but I think it's always important to try to practice. So if you can just outline what it is you might talk about and try to get a few ideas down, you probably won't have all the facts and figures at your fingertips that you might want, but you can get something down. It's very important to be prepared to talk to people on this. And I'm preaching to myself because I often feel reluctant to appear to be proselytizing or in some way pushing my views on other people. But it's not a question of pushing something on other people. It's a question of finding a connection with them and building that bridge that will allow them to see things in a new way.
I think that what you're saying is actually very important for us to hear, because as we all interact with people who don't always see eye to eye with us, it can be quite frustrating, especially when they ask us to cite our resources as if we are some walking encyclopedia who remembers everything we've read, listened to, or heard. And
exactly.
So,
but it can be reassuring and somewhat heartening if you have something not necessarily memorized, but if you've worked on something like this and it's sort of on the tip of your tongue, I guess I could say, that when you begin the conversation, you may be able to rely on this as a conversation starter. Some important tips about how we would make a presentation or how we would talk when we were using this. Like any time, it's important to speak slowly and to pause between the sentences, especially since these sentences are probably jam-packed because you're being succinct. You don't want to use jargon or acronyms or complicated terms. There's nothing more off-putting than a sort of alphabet soup from someone who's familiar with the topic and you are not, and then you have no idea what they are saying. Now, in the example I gave before, where I was talking about carbon crew, crew is an acronym. So I had to use it because it's the title of the project, but I do explain it, and at least that makes it a little more acceptable. It's also advised that we only use one metric for credibility when we create one of these short talks. So you notice that in the example I gave, I used the metric about 2/3 of all household, 2/3 of all greenhouse gases result from decisions made on the household level. That's enough data. We don't want to overwhelm people with a lot of facts and figures. You just want enough to make your case. And then I've already talked about the fact that presenting the step one, the problem or the issue, as a question can be attention getting. So unfortunately, I don't think we have time or technological ability to see what other people may have come up with. I'm going to give you another example here of something that I wrote in a relatively short time based on a smaller subject than just all of climate change, and that is food waste. So you can see I'm stating the problem. Did you, as a question, did you know that food waste is a major cause of climate change? And then the next step, number 2, food is lost at every stage from farm to fork. But in America, the most waste happens at the consumer stage. 3, the consequence: in 2019, nearly 130 billion meals went unsold or uneaten in the US, which is not only a waste of money and nutrition, but also contributed significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. And then number 4, the important solution: we can all help solve this problem by purchasing wisely, using up leftovers, and eating everything we buy, so that we keep food out of the landfill. So you can see how that flows a little. Obviously, step 3, the consequence, usually requires a little bit of research or some kind of data that you're going to look up so that you have that scientific backing. But for the most part, it flows along in a very compact way. So this kind of speech, an elevator pitch, is a systemic and unified statement that speaks from a single voice and is easily comprehensible. But Hayhoe was emphasizing a very different kind of communication, really, where you would speak from the heart and connect personally with the other, create an exchange or a dialogue. A real conversation is dynamic and interactive and more apt to evoke commitment. It draws the participant in, encouraging relationship and ongoing intersection. When a person responds and engages, that is a form of action. Remember how we began by thinking about what our motivation for concern about climate change was? And remember how Hayhoe told us the anecdote about the Rotary Club talk, where she deduced the values that would speak to her audience? If we want to talk about climate change effectively, we need to speak from our hearts to the hearts of others. But we also want to reach as many people as we can. So again, it is helpful to be prepared. So who can we reach out to with our message? We want to brainstorm all our different connections, whether they're friends, family, colleagues from work, people that are in groups that we belong to, whether we go to the gym, whether we have a book group, all of those different connections that we have. And then after we've written down all of those people and groups and categories of things, we want to plan the best way that we would reach each of them. So in some cases, it might be social media, whether we're going to talk about posting on Twitter regularly so that people know what we're involved in, Facebook, Instagram, or whether we're going to try to reach out to people by email, whether we're going to use an excuse to make a phone call to a friend we haven't talked to in a long time, possibly because of the pandemic. Maybe we're going to actually write a letter to someone or a postcard, some old school communication that might kind of delight people when they got something different. And we would encourage you in crew, when we talk about this networking and making this networking map, I unfortunately had some examples that I can't seem to show you, but we encourage people to be creative, to write down this connective web of people in a sort of artistic way, if you like. Is it a spider web, or is it a sun with rays, or is it a wheel with spokes? One of our participants had a boat sailing away on the sea of all her different connections. So you can be a little bit imaginative, but the important thing is, and Hayhoe talked about this too, is to have a plan about how you're going to do it. Actually, Hayhoe talks about it, but also Cray had mentioned, if you saw the earlier thing, that one of the solutions to climate change is to make a plan. And we need to make a plan about how we will reach other people, because we know that communication is a form of action. So to conclude, I would just say that for some of our contacts, your elevator pitch will be the first step, a way to inform and prompt talk. But with others, you will be able to plunge right into a heartfelt conversation. The crucial thing is to get a dialogue going. So please write your pitch, map your network, and be ready to use your voice to amplify the vision of this growing movement of regeneration. To quote Paul Hawken again, in conclusion, the most complex, radical climate technologies on Earth are the human heart, head, and mind, not a solar panel. Thank you very much, and apologies for the technological issues.